way to understand the Islamic revelation is through its cosmology. To assist with this, in this presentation we will look very briefly at some essential cosmological symbolism, especially as we find it in Mecca. The symbolism we are discussing is found throughout the Quran and more extensively in Islamic life and ritual. In the Quran there is this verse, for instance: "And we have created above you 7 paths, and we send down from the sky water in measure, and we give it lodging in the earth." Quran 23:17-18. There are others, but this one will do. It is always important to escape from modern abstractions. In a cosmological reading of the Quran, we are sensitive to concrete nouns: sky, water, earth, simple things, symbols, signs in a traditional cosmology. A sensitivity to these things guides our reading anyway. You'll see these in traditional exegesis and common usage of the Quran. People elide verses or skip phrases, compact verses. What they are doing is joining the nouns. We must abandon our modern abstractions in order to do this and appreciate the method. The Quran may be timeless, but its cosmology is that of late antiquity, and its spirituality is that of the desert nomad. So the first point is the simple and ubiquitous symbolism that depends upon parallelisms between water and revelation. This is an extensive symbolism and natural enough to Islam's desert setting. This is our main topic here. We shouldn't need to labour the fact that springs, wells and waterholes are considered holy in any desert culture, but in Islam there is more extensive analogy between water and revelation. In particular, revelation is analogous to rain. It is a life-giving mercy that comes from the heavens by God's will. We find this analogy across many traditions. It's biblical, but it is especially Islamic. It is the central symbolism of Mecca, that sacred waterhole in the desert. Nor do we need to labour the fact that water is precious in this context, and so a fitting symbol for sanctity and grace. Water is holy. It purifies. Muslims clean themselves with water spiritually. The symbolism of water is absolutely central to Islam. If you ask what is the first thing to know about Islam, it is that symbolism of water is central to its spiritual cosmology of basic symbols. And this is why the Quranic text, the calligraphy, is very often written encased in clouds. The implicit metaphor is that the Quranic text has precipitated into human language. Revelation is like rain. You need to understand this in all its implications. The Quran speaks of signs, that is, symbols, ayat in Arabic. We have to engage with the things of nature as signs. Cloud symbolism enters here. Clouds are symbols or signs of God's mercy. Clouds are merciful in the desert. Men can thirst in spiritual deserts for centuries, but from time to time the rain comes, a new revelation. The waters of the sky overflow. In Mecca we find this symbolism, these metaphors, in a quite graphic conjunction. In the valley between 2 hills is the well of Zamzam. Adjacent to it, originally, is the Kaaba. The whole place is about water as a symbol of the sacred. Pilgrims to Mecca get caught up in the commemorative power of the place. The pilgrimage has become largely commemorative. Worse, the environment, even the topography of the modern city has been seriously degraded. We have to imagine it in the beginning. Basically, it is a valley between 2 hills with a spring and the Kaaba. It is a place of habitation and a place of veneration, purely and simply because of the water. It is little understood today that the Kaaba is essentially and originally symbolic of revelation as rain, complementing the well of Zamzam, which is revelation that springs up out of the desert. The analogy is simple but quite exact. Subterranean waters symbolize tradition, the waters of previous rainfall stored and travelling unseen underground. Then there are the celestial waters of fresh rain. By another reading, revelation takes 2 forms, the exoteric and the esoteric, the outer and the inner, and the Kaaba represents the outer and visible, while Zamzam represents the hidden and inner. The symbolic topography of the sanctuary of Mecca concerns all of this. To put it somewhat starkly, the Kaaba was originally a water tank, a tank for rainwater. The sanctuary in the valley places rainwater and underground water together, the Kaaba and the well of Zamzam. Eventually a roof was placed on the Kaaba which obscured this symbolism, but even then the pipes at the corners were designed to throw rainwater out into the surrounding courtyard in the four directions. It makes a display of rainwater, the Kaaba building. That is the important thing about the Kaaba. It is all about rainwater. It is essentially a tank for rainwater. This original simplicity is now buried under a plethora of other associations, and no one wants to admit that millions of pilgrims circumambulate an ancient water tank, but we need to acknowledge the reality of it. You will see old photographs of the Kaaba deep in floodwaters. That wasn't a design fault. It was placed where it floods. The access door is above the flood line. The topography has been changed in recent times, so it doesn't flood anymore. But that changes the original scheme and obscures the original associations with rain even further. It was a cistern for collecting rain next to the well, where it floods. By extension though, the Kaaba is about celestial revelations more broadly, things that come from the sky rather than up from the earth, like the well. It's important to understand that it was originally open to the sky, the holy water tank, the sacred cistern. And so the black stone was added to the ensemble of symbols. It represents revelation from above, simply put, just as rain does. In the desert cosmology, meteorite showers are a species of rain. Modern people might have trouble making that leap. They have so little experience of the night sky, but it's an obvious extension of the analogy. When the black stone fell from the sky, the obvious thing to do with it was to take it to the Kaaba, which is, in a basic sense, a shrine to things that fall from the sky. Primarily water, but also, sometimes, fire and light. Perhaps the most revealing story in early Islam is that Muhammad's uncle rediscovered and reopened the well of Zamzam just prior to the coming of Islam. This symbolic story signifies renewed contact with the underground stream. It is a very important story. Throughout this symbolism, thirst is a state of the soul. Thirst is the human condition. Revelation quenches the thirst of the soul. That metaphor is implicit and prevails. The mood of Islam is a homesickness, a nostalgia, but its zeal is a thirst. The pilgrimage to Mecca reenacts the search for water by Hagar and Ishmael, and then their discovery of the life-giving waters of Zamzam. It is Abraham and Ishmael who then build the Kaaba. Stories that the Kaaba itself descended from the clouds, or that a white cloud descended upon it, are extensions of this same basic symbolism. Rain, spring water, meteorites, clouds, elements of a simple cosmology. The black stone signifies more though. It tells us that the symbolism extends to the stellar level. We have to appreciate the desert cosmology, the raw and primal experience of the sky. There are clouds of stars above the clouds of rain, and showers of meteors, upper clouds, stellar rain. Revelation emerges ultimately from the ineffable darkness beyond the stars, and of which the emptiness of the desert itself is an image. In this way, sky and earth meet in this symbolism. This is what makes the sanctuary sacred and inviolable. There is much more to it, of course, but we have to start with the basics. The most important thing to grasp is that water is analogous to revelation. Thus is the well sacred and the rain collected by the Kaaba. The Kaaba is the empty receptacle that receives revelation from above. It's the emptiness of the desert, waiting for rain. Needless to say, we don't think about water and rain like this anymore. We don't think in analogies. We are insensitive to that more poetic way of thinking. And worse, the scientific way of thinking cuts us off entirely from even a basic sensitivity to the traditional cosmos of lived symbols. Without those symbols, though, all you are left with is superstitions. There is a primal level of symbolism, a primal symbolism that must be grasped first. One of the things about the Quran is that it has a small, very simple vocabulary. Look at all those nouns: rain, sky, earth, cloud, water. It is good to engage with the Quran sensitive to its concreteness, its primordiality. The next thing to appreciate, as we extend this symbolism, is that water is interchangeable with light. Rain is like light. This is another leap the modern mind won't take readily, but think about it. When it's not raining, what is there in Mecca? The sun. The Kaaba was originally open to the sky. That is the point. Being open to that which comes from above. That is what the Kaaba symbolizes. Being open to that which comes from above. Rain, meteors, but also light. Water and light symbolism can be interchangeable because both fall from the sky. It follows as part of the same meteorological symbolism. The Quran is permeated with the ancient meteorological symbolism of the nomadic cosmos, implied or implicit. We have to surrender our modern sophistications in order to reconnect with it. This is why the waters of Zamzam are described as luminous, and why the symbolism of gold and silver becomes attached to the Kaaba. The shrine, though essentially about water, develops a parallel symbolism of light. In this analogy, rain is a condensation of light, just as are crystals. There are some very celebrated verses of the Quran where, in the same way as rain, revelation is compared to the light that falls from the sky. In this step alone, our symbolism expands to profound dimensions. Thinking in analogies is like that. The traditional mind understands this move from water to light without any trouble. Now consider the symbolism of the pilgrimage. In the Hajj, the pilgrims move from hilltop to hilltop 7 times, resting at each vantage point to look down into the valley as Hagar did in her search for water. The pace of the pilgrims slows to a walk as they climb each hill, then accelerates into a bolt as they descend into the vale between. This is a celestial symbolism, solar and stellar. The 2 hills represent the 2 tropics defined by the furthermost limits of the sun's movements along the horizon throughout its yearly course. The sun slows towards the solstices and speeds up to a bolt at the equinoxes. The 7 circuits are the 7 planets, the 7 paths, as the Quran calls them. Because the Kaaba is open to the sky is imprinted upon the earth. The sun can be fierce in its heat, but it also, and more importantly, illuminates. Zamzam is not just a watering hole, but a wellspring of divine light in a celestial landscape. Notice how the Quran connects these things. Treat the Quran as a set of signs. Here is our verse again. And we have created above you 7 paths, and we send down from the sky water in measure, and we give it lodging in the earth. This verse, I'm aware that we are taking liberties to get this reading, reveals the essential symbolism that we find encoded into the topography of Mecca, namely the 7 paths, the water from the sky, the water from the earth. Modern people have to work hard to reacquire a sensitivity to this order of symbolism. We have to unlearn many things. The real difficulty is that it is simple. If you lived in Mecca in 5th century AD, it would arise naturally out of the environment, both the geography and the sky. The symbolism, the whole cosmology, is of course pre-Islamic. Islam didn't invent this cosmology, but merely rectifies it, drawing it into a revivified Abrahamic mythology and installing the God of Abraham at its core. Modern Muslims struggle with this type of symbolism, purely because they are modern. The modern pilgrim will have little appreciation of the basic symbolism of Mecca, because in our times the compound has been turned into an Islamic theme park by the Saudis. The Kaaba was roofed over long ago. There is nothing we can do about this. but the work of understanding doesn't stop. Here we have exposed a simple set of parallels of cardinal basic importance: water, revelation, light. This is the operative symbolism of Mecca and is therefore at the heart of the Islamic faith. Again, the best way to understand the Islamic revelation is through its cosmology. Almost no one does this today, not ordinary Muslims, not even the Sufis. Whereas, what is a religion but a set of symbols to contemplate? The method is to start with simple things: the symbolism of water, revelation, light. Conceptualize in primordial categories: sky and earth, above and below. Try to understand from this basic symbolism what made Mecca a sacred place. Put it back into its cosmology. This in no way diminishes it. Rather, it enables us to understand its language, which is inherently a language of symbols and similitudes. There is a type of contextualizing that is reductive. This is not what we're doing here. Rather, we are extracting an alphabet of symbols or signs in order to open up deeper, archaic meanings. It enables us to reconnect somewhat with its deepest layers of inspiration. The norms of piety aren't helpful here. Instead, we want to get back to the roots of things through a cosmological engagement.